Welcome to my first YouTube video. This is a speed painting of Kaldur'ahm from Young Justice with references. From the sketch, I start laying down my line work. My canvas is actually mirrored, so whatever is done on one side of the canvas is duplicated on the other side of the canvas. I'll probably make another video that shows how I did my sketch in the first place. It's also mirrored, and I think that mirroring is also a great way to come up with faces, because the resulting face is usually completely original, at least I find. And from the line art, I jump straight into toning. So I typically start with a flat tone, and then I add several tones layered on top of it. Generally, I use a brush with low opacity. If I start with one type of gray, I only increase the value of that gray or decrease the value of that gray marginally, and I build up the drawing with those different values over time. Sometimes, like in this drawing, I use a light gray for highlight, and I go down the tonal scale to add in my shadows over time, and I continue building them up. You might notice that I work primarily on one layer. That's if you can see it in the corner. So I'll have a base layer, and then I'll do most, if not all, of my details on the layer just above that. There are two reasons for that. One is because that's a lot closer to how one would draw traditionally, and two is because it saves a lot of memory on my computer, so it's not overburdened with a heavy file or a lot of processing while I'm doing the drawing. And my computer isn't the best. It's definitely not bad. It's a good computer. It's a great computer. But in terms of the work that I do, my work tends to be very heavy. The file sizes are usually really large, and since I'm working with a lot of detail, that size is a necessity. So it allows me to get a lot more detail in the images when I work. As you can see, I've used several different references. I've used a shitload of references actually for this one drawing. The references tend to serve two purposes. One of the purposes is to give me an idea of different features to combine, and the other purpose is lighting. For my references, I try to flip images or gather images in a way that they will have, for the most part, lighting that's coming from the same direction, or a lot of ambient light, so you can't tell which direction they're coming from. For the ones that have a lot of ambient light, it's good because it gives you a sense of form on the reference, and then you can use one or two additional references for the direct light source in the entire drawing. I know that Kaldur'ahm has like this widow's peak, and none of my references actually have that, so I'm referencing the character while I'm also referencing those hairstyles at the same time. None of my references really had a fade. I kinda had to make up the fade on the fly, but I didn't want the sides of his head to be completely shaved the way they are in the original source material, that is a cartoon or a comic. So Kaldur'ahm's tattoos aren't that interesting to me. You might call them markings, because they're not exactly tattoos. I don't even know what they are, to tell you the truth, but there are these markings on his body that glow whenever he's about to use his magic with his weapon, or whenever he's about to control water in any way. In any event, I found that his markings weren't as interesting to me the way that they were. I decided to create shapes out of negative space instead of just having the markings as one solid black mass. I practiced henna for 10 consecutive years, so of course I wanted to integrate that into the markings on his body. For coloring, I pretty much just color picked a brown and changed the blend mode to that brown. Then I added an undertone that was a completely different color, and I erased some areas of the tone above it so that there would be some variation in color to give a better impression of what skin would look like, in my estimation at least. After that, I use the color balance tool to make some tonal adjustments. So some of the darker areas would have maybe a little bit more blues in them, while some of the lighter areas might have a little bit more yellow in them. It's very subtle, but it does make a difference, I find. Moving on to the eyes immediately, you know, Kaldur'ahm's eyes are green. It's a very specific shade of green. And then from there I moved on to the hair. Again, a very specific color. It's not quite blonde. It's like a pale curryish brownish color. That's probably a terrible description, but anyway, moving on from that, I actually completely forgot to add his gills, and I found that I ended up doing that last minute. So the original silhouette didn't have them at all, and then I added them afterwards. Since this was supposed to be a triple illustration with outfit changes in between, I started constructing the manta armor around Kaldur'ahm's body. I'm just using lines at first, trying to match up what could be the real world construction with what is in the show. And then I filled in the lines with a really dark gray, but I made sure to erase his chest area and use the lighting of his bare chest pretty much in the same way as the lighting for the final armor in that chest area. I saved the armor file separately, and then I moved back on to his hair to put in some additional details to add some waves. I think waves on short hair looks really great. I don't wear them myself, but I do admire seeing them on other persons, and I thought that would actually cement his real world look that you could envision the character having if he was a real person. By the way, there's some more work like this on my Instagram page. If you guys want to see the process for any of that stuff, please let me know in the comments below. Now I've added his original costume from the series. I wanted it to look a little less like a costume and more like everyday menswear, I suppose. So I did reference these merinos. I think some persons call them wife beaters. In Jamaica we call them marina. While I'm working, I'll often switch between the two apps that I use most for drawing, and that's Sketchbook Pro and Photoshop. I find that when it comes to lines, I feel much more comfortable using Sketchbook Pro, and when it comes to filling out anything that's in those lines, I'll use Photoshop to do that. As soon as I was done with that, I moved right back onto the manta armor to kind of finish it up, clean up some lines, add in a little bit more detail here and there. I knew that I wanted him to be backlit, that's why you see all of those backlit references on the left, although those references don't really have anything to do with the shape of this armor. So later on, after noticing that I was kind of rendering the light in a way that made the armor look like plastic, I decided to look for some other references. My friend Jono had the excellent idea, but a little bit too late, to use the Batman live action movies and reference that tactical gear. That's an excellent idea, but I had already gone way too far in the drawing already and started referencing guns to get the finish on the armor that I thought would have been most effective. So you'll see those guns in just a bit. Right here, I think in the original armor, these are some kinds of buttons or studs, but I decided to make them light, just little LEDs. I thought probably that brought another dimension to the armor that is otherwise missing, that would make it look a little plain. And here are the guns that I was talking about before. No, these black stripes that are on the armor, I actually don't know what the shit these things are. There is no real indication of form for them in the cartoon, and there is no, I don't know, there's no change in how they're lit or their color value from one scene to the next, even if the lighting in the scene is completely different. So I really don't know what they are, but I just decided to make them some kind of metallic straps. I don't know, they're holding the shoulder pads in place or something. I don't know what they're doing, but I guess they're an interesting design element, and I think they're supposed to represent features of an actual manta ray. So I guess maybe they're just black painted stripes that absorb all light as soon as the light hits them. The face or the head and neck that's attached to this armor drawing, it doesn't have much detail, and that's because I stripped off all of the highlights that were on the previous drawing that I did so that I could draw them again with fresh lighting, because I knew that I wanted him to be completely backlit in this costume change. I also knew that I wanted the backlight to be red, so I'm making my preparations for that on the armor itself. And this is primarily, this here on the left is the primary reference that I used for the backlit face of Kaldur'ahm. When things are lit from the back, there is often what people call a halo. So the rim or the silhouette of an object will have this white lining, or whatever color the light is will line the silhouette of the object. But it also changes how everything on that face or object is lit. Later on, I'll copy over the hair layer from the other drawing, and I'll just change the lighting just slightly, and I'll use my blending modes to help match it back to the lighting that's on his bald head right now. These weapons, I realized that I hadn't added them before, and it really frustrated me that I had to work on them now, but here we are. So I tried to use more guns as reference for these weapons, but it wasn't really working out, so I decided to use bicycle handles instead. Anything can be a reference. Obviously these weapons don't exist in real life. I have no clue what they're supposed to look like, so I decided to make them bicycle handles. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other pages on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, or I guess that's it.